Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. Coming up this week, Fonterra's 15-cent cut to the forecast payout as exporters are quietly choked by the high dollar. How much more of a headwind will the strong Kiwi be for the dairy giant and others in the coming months? The red meat sector, where's it heading? We look at markets for beef and lamb, old and new, and explore how best to capitalise on future global demand for safe, good food. And they're buying our farms, but for how much longer? The Labour leader's private members' bill trying to limit the government's scope to approve sales of our rural heartland. In the studio with me this week, Jeff Smith taking time out from the busy editor's desk at Straight Furrow, and Mike Peterson, Hawke's Bay beef and sheep farmer and the chairman of Beef and Lamb New Zealand. Gentlemen, can we just talk about Fonterra briefly? That the cut in the forecast payout, 15 cents down, it's been announced this week. Still a bloody good payout, isn't it?
The farmers are all expecting it. Yeah, I think many of them are expecting it to be more. But it swings and roundabouts, up and down. It's beyond their control. World markets are beyond their control. The demand is getting higher, but the prices are necessarily going down overseas. We can't control the dollar. If we could, we'd be on easy street.
Is it just the high dollar to blame? I mean, you talk about overseas markets. There's more global supply happening, isn't there?
Oh, that's right. There's certainly production increases happening globally, and that's certainly having an effect on pricing going forward. But, you know, I think Jeff's right. This is a commodity correction, a price correction. It's not a crash, and we're still seeing historically high levels. And
farmers would have budgeted for this, as you say. They would have been expecting maybe worse than this.
No farmer in his right mind would be budgeting on a payment of over $6 at the moment, I wouldn't think.
Well, we always like to hope, Jeff. But,
yeah, but a budget and hope are two different things.
That's right.
Yeah.
Look, I think farmers, we're exporting over 90% of what we produce, so we're very aware of the value of the dollar. It's continuing to stay high. It has to impact on farm gate returns.
Mm. And you mentioned, we're sitting pretty at the moment, but in the future, as other people enter the market, as global supply, starts to come from other countries. You mentioned South America.
The pressure's just going to come on. That's why Fonterra has to stay ahead of the game, and that's why they've got to get their act together on where they're going to get the money for development from. Whether you're pro or against, for this TAF, they've got to get money from somewhere, and they've got to keep developing because it's a fast-moving world out there.
And Fonterra on track, do you think?
There's no doubt. There's no doubt. I'm sure they can do things better, but everybody can. But if they're not doing things the way the farmers want, the farmers own it after all. It's nothing to do with the public. It's nothing to do with Mike and myself. The farmers will let them know, and they do through their shareholders' council. So, but we just don't hear about it.
Mm-hmm. You got any thoughts on what's going on with Fonterra at the moment? I know they've got a bit of a hard sell going on there with the farmers and the TAF scheme.
They have, but I think that, as the chairman keeps reminding farmers, they voted overwhelmingly for it 18 months ago. So, I think TAF will happen, and I think there's probably a bit of work to do to still get some of those farmers on board. But if you look at the strategy they put out yesterday, and their new chief executive talked about particularly their cash generators and where they're going in the future, I think they've got a very sound strategy. They know where they need to get to. They need to sort the capital base out, the capital structure out, but their strategy around India and the growth markets and the opportunities is pretty sound.
Mm. Farmers, as you say, they did vote for this a year and a half ago, but there's quite a deep level of suspicion and distrust, I think, now about where things are heading.
Well, do you think it's suspicion or distrust, or do you think it's a campaign of undermining a pretty powerful lobby in the South Island? But as for the numbers, nobody knows, but they're certainly vocal. And again, the Kiwi way, tall poppy, wee choppy. So I know some of the people personally involved, and they make their opinions heard anywhere.
Has Fonterra been as upfront as it could have been with farmers, perhaps? Do you think that's the problem that
I think they've been totally upfront. I think the information that they give, they've probably killed people with an oversupply of information. Maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe they've made something rather simplistic, very difficult, simply by trying to protect themselves from all angles. I feel there's an element of that in it, especially when the sniping and the attacking comes through the media, which it doesn't in a normal company. It comes in the boardroom.
This is played out very publicly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not by choice by Fonterra, but by the opponents of whatever they do. And believe me, whatever they do, there's always going to be somebody say that they're not right.
Let's leave dairy behind for now and talk beef and lamb. And Mike, let's get this out of the way first. Keith Cooper's recent resignation last month. He walked away and he didn't go quietly. Not a good look, was it?
Well, look, it wasn't, and it was a surprise to us and the organisation as well. And disappointing, frankly, because, I mean, Keith was there representing the whole meat industry on our board, along with one other meat industry director. And then so to resign only 3 weeks before his term was due to end anyway was clearly, in order to try and generate some publicity around some issues that he has with the organisation. Disappointing. I'd prefer we didn't, end up looking like the industry is fighting publicly. But look, Keith's got his views, and the Silver Fern Farm view is that he didn't want to be there, and so I fully respect that.
Is there a rift? Are there divisions?
No, there's no rift or divisions, but what there are certainly is there are some disagreements around some aspects of what Beef and Lamb New Zealand do. 2 parts in particular that Keith mentioned: our work in the market, where we actually assist in funding promotion alongside the meat companies in some key markets offshore. And so Silver Fern Farms have a view that they'd rather we weren't in that space, and I fully understand that. And secondly, we've had our primary growth partnership application approved through the business case stage, which is an accelerator program for farm productivity for our farmers, where we're getting funding from the government, assuming it's finally approved, to actually get on with much more of that work. Silver Fern Farms are involved in a program called Farm IQ, which they see as being in conflict or in competition to our successful primary growth partnership application. So, look, I've got to say that this has not been approved yet. We've only been approved to now put a business case together and then actually start putting the project together. But Silver Fern Farms still see that as threatening to their own program.
And he was talking, Cooper, I know, about there being duplications and double ups, and that it wasn't a good use of money.
No, but there can't be. I mean, the reality is that MEF are the sole arbiter here, and they are the ones that make the recommendation for funding each of these primary growth partnership applications. And they will not fund something twice. So if it's already being done by someone else or it's being duplicated somewhere else, it simply wouldn't be approved in the format it's been put forward currently.
Jeff, how did this look to you, looking from the outside in?
Well, I think Mike hit the nail on the head. He only had 3 weeks to go. And if he was trying to influence the upcoming elections, he failed miserably because both the incumbents were re-elected. So it's a bit of a damn squib, and it's dead in the water before it made good copy for people to say that, dramatic, and really wasn't that dramatic at all. I mean, you have 3 weeks to go. I mean, you're just leaving a bit early, but you're going to grab a few headlines before you go. It's all over. It's all forgotten about, I think, in the media mind. My reading of it is that Mr. Cooper himself is under some considerable pressure to perform his company. His latest pronouncement that he's looking at or suggesting a livestock levy to support the Otago rugby team. Talking some figure of $700,000. Since when has a meat company been in the business of... There you go. So that maybe sort of puts what's happening in a bit of perspective. I don't know.
So to sum up, not a big deal for farmers.
No, look, but we respect, clearly Silver Fern Farms, one of the biggest meat companies in New Zealand. So fully respect their right to have a view. But we relate directly with our farmer shareholders, and we do that on a daily basis. We're happy to live by farmers' decisions about whether the organisation exists or not the view of one meat company chief executive.
And they're generally very happy.
They are. In fact, the support we've had in the last couple of weeks has just been phenomenal. So it's actually probably crystallised support for the organisation. And so, look, I thank Keith for that.
Coming up, the high exchange rates mean New Zealand's not making the most of record prices for beef in the United States. The US beef herd is at its lowest in more than 50 years, while prices are the highest they've ever been. More on that and plenty more after the break. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. I'm Karen McCarthy. We're back with Jeff Smith and Mike Peterson. High exchange rates mean New Zealand's not making the most of record prices for beef in the United States. Is this a worry, Mike? I mean, how much are we missing out on?
Well, we are missing out. There's no doubt about that, because we're seeing prices in America now for US manufacturing beef at around 220 US cents per pound. I mean, you know, it was only five or 6 years ago, if it got to 120 cents, we were happy. So
it's right, they are the highest we've ever seen.
Record levels. and unfortunately, we're now seeing farm gate prices coming back at a time when those record prices are happening. So the currency is a huge driver here. There's no doubt about it. And in fact, if you look at all the commentators and you look at what's happening globally, in actual fact, the outlook for beef for this coming year is for prices to continue to rise, even above what they are today. So the outlook's extremely positive. And demand is strong, but this Kiwi dollar is not helping it get back to the farm gate.
How long, Jeff, do you think until the government has to do something? I mean, it's just climbing. I think it's 82 cents US at the moment. They're talking about it could go as high as 88.
No, I don't see this government doing anything. I don't actually see this government doing anything much at all that would indicate that they're farmer friendly. Purely political decisions, balance one off against the other. Okay, you've cheaper imports, so the exports can suffer, but to be a farmer and see the cream taken off it at the time when everything's going right from an outside force, besides the market's on your side, and then you're going to lose every time the dollar goes up another cent, and it's up and down and up and down. And it's going to continue to do that, I think.
How long can we continue to wear this, do you think, exporters?
Well, the reality is you can't ask no government's going to do anything, you know. So, I mean, you know, we had 9 years of a Labor government and the dollar was up and down too, and no one did anything then. So, look, this is simply a matter of, unfortunately, we are at the mercy of the markets and the foreign exchange, you know, fluctuations. We need foreign capital to come in New Zealand. If New Zealand could live within its means, we might be able to think about some other things that we could do, but we just can't do that. So the reality is the dollar is going to continue to fluctuate. It's really frustrating for us as an exporter, but you know, you can't expect the government to step in and do it because that'll backfire every time. Once we start playing against the global money markets, New Zealand will lose. We're such a small part of it.
You talk about overseas capital coming into the country, which, you know, we could maybe talk here about foreign land ownership of our land. David Shearer's introduced his private members bill this week, talking about limiting the government's scope to approve deals such as the Graver Farm sales, which is dragging on and on. I'm not sure where things are at with that at the moment. It's all gone quiet the last couple of weeks. That would suggest to me you think that's not a bad thing.
Look, I think it's largely politics, you know, Shearer's bill. And I don't think it will achieve, you know, what he's really wanting to try and achieve. But look, I'm a realist, and I've never actually seen a foreign investor buy a farm in New Zealand and then pick it up and take it away. You know, so foreign investors that have invested in New Zealand have generally reinvested back in the farms. And I've actually never seen anyone from New Zealand who's bought farms in New Zealand take profits out of New Zealand. They've generally gone and invested in other parts of New Zealand as well. So the trouble is, if you close the border to foreign investors around land and consider it sensitive, then effectively you're saying to foreign investors, you know, we just don't know what New Zealand's going to do in the future. So why would you even invest in anything in New Zealand, or even lend them your money so New Zealand can pay its way in the world? So, you know, where do we want to be? We can live in a third world country where effectively the door's shut and we live a subsistence economy, or we actually integrate with the world, and I think we have to do the latter.
Shearer's bill, political grandstanding, do you see any point to it?
Well, it's not going to go anywhere. Already there's criticism coming out that it's ridiculously drafted and it doesn't do any more than the existing law does. I think the most interesting development now is how the OIO has to view every application.
From now on.
It's interesting that the government are happy with that, because they've said this week they are not going to challenge the ruling. They're comfortable with it. And the protections are all there. This has just become emotional. And again, I've done some research on Alan Crafer, and more than 20 years ago they were the tall poppies and envy. And I know he's been a pioneering person in the industry. A lot of where people are today, they owe to some of the work that he did. And it's become emotional. And I don't care what anybody says, it's xenophobic. It's anti-Chinese, and don't worry, it doesn't take long for that sort of thing to spread around. And we need capital, we need money, we can't generate it ourselves. So I think, again, it will quietly go away, and maybe that's why the OIO is holding back and just letting the heat die down.
When we look at foreign investment in this country too, in the land. I mean, Mike, you said to me this week that our reputation, our integrity, that's the thing New Zealand's got, its clean, green image when it comes to food in particular, and that's going to be a big issue heading into the future, isn't it? The availability and distribution of safe, good food.
Absolutely. I mean, it's why foreign investors are looking to New Zealand, and so we should actually start to think about that as New Zealanders, and actually think about just what we've got here, because I don't think we understand just what value the integrity of New Zealand's exporting and farming systems, the reputation and quality of our food. This is just sought after the world over. And so the reason foreign investors are coming here to buy land and to get involved in food production is because then they can actually capitalise on what New Zealand has to offer. You know, what a wonderful opportunity. And yet I'd probably rather say, look, New Zealanders need to look more closely at land and get involved in food production, because if we don't, the overseas buyers will. And
we still are, and are going to be, a food basket for the world, even more so in the future.
Yes, but remember, we can only feed, you know, I mean, depends on which numbers you use, about 20 million people a year out of New Zealand. 100 million people on Western diets. So in a global population of, 7 billion going to 9 billion, we're a very, very small supplier of food to the global market. Which is why I keep saying, if we're worried about people not being able to afford our food, then let's just go and talk to the 20 million people who can.
What about emerging markets for beef and lamb in this country, or overseas from this country? Our traditional markets, is it right or wrong to still rely on those? I'm thinking Europe, the United States. I'm not sure what other mature markets there are. You can tell me maybe.
Well, for New Zealand, the big focus at the moment is on Asia. There's no doubt about it. But for the meat industry, Asia simply is struggling to afford what we produce. So for the meat industry, we're going to be reliant on America and Europe and Japan and Koreas of this world for some time to come. And we should be, because they're affluent consumers there who know and understand the product and who will keep buying our expensive centre of plate meat products. So look, clearly Asia and India, particularly China and India, are the big opportunities. And we're working quite hard now to just see where New Zealand can fit in there. But that's going to take some time.
Because everybody talks about China, isn't it? It's all China. But as you say, there's plenty of other countries in Asia there to target as well.
Very much so. And we shouldn't forget India. This is a massive opportunity in India. And the free trade agreement talks that are underway right now are crucial.
You see a lot of growth there?
India's flying under the radar at the moment. Everybody's looking at China. And that I think that will have an end. The point I would like to make when you're talking about moving to emerging markets, we don't have enough to supply the markets we've got.
We're a small player.
Well, but it's not that. It's you go and try and buy a container load of beef, for example, to ship to Turkey. Okay, you can't get it. They either the demand is too high or they can get better prices elsewhere. And I've heard many complaints about people wanting to shift meat overseas, and we don't have enough. So
what do we do about that?
Well, it's smart marketing. You go where you get the best price, and I think in the short term, the Middle East market is huge. I have personal experience of that. And they cannot get enough.
But the key thing is we've got to have a basket of markets where we can selectively choose which cuts to send to. So, Indonesia is a massive beef market. I think it's about our number 6 export market out of New Zealand now. And I think it's about the 6th most populous nation on earth. So, people just forget about Indonesias and the Indias of this world that are just such a big opportunity.
And it's
got to get access to.
All there sitting on our doorstep.
That's right.
After the break, we give the last word to our guests on what's got them on red alert in the rural world, and those strikes, the wharfies and the meat workers, industrial unrest like we've not seen in a long time. Stay with us for more Straight Talk when we return. Welcome back to Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Furrow. You wanted to talk about the strikes. We've seen incredible unrest in recent weeks on the waterfront here in Auckland and around the country at freezing works. What's going on?
Well, I would hesitate to call it incredible. When you go back to the 70s and 80s and what strikes used to be like.
We haven't seen anything kind of like this.
They're a dime a dozen, but the wharfies have always been to the forefront, even in the 1950s, well, especially in the 1950s, and they've never really changed. So there's still dinosaur mentality in there, I have no doubt, because it's been passed down from generation to generation, because the jobs, let's not forget, go from generation to generation. I come from Dunedin, and people on the wharf there, their father was on the wharf and their father was on there before him, and they sort of had jobs for life. Yep, they're making a point. I fail to see what the point is. I wouldn't mind their salary.
I guess it's about working conditions, isn't it? They're
I
saying
think their
that.
working conditions will be pretty darn good if I know the wharfies. Yeah, I just see that other people may be finding this an opportune time to air some, flex some muscle, air some grievances that they wouldn't normally be able to do without the wharfies. Wharfies taking the hits, shall we say, and these other guys there's all sorts of little strikes popping up all over the place, and some not so little, and might talk about that.
We've got freezing works.
Yeah.
AFCO plants have been hard hit in the last couple of weeks as well. Lockouts, strikes. Is that causing issues in terms of production, disruption to production?
Look, my understanding is it's not, and that there are enough non-unionised staff to be able to cope with the throughput that's coming through. So, I mean, they always used to say in the strikes of old, you know, the definition of an optimist was a meat worker who took his lunch to work. You know, so I mean, this is not quite like what it was. But look, you know, I've got an understanding, obviously, of the AFCO business. They are very good at getting efficient companies going, and so, you know, I mean, I just think they are trying to make themselves more efficient in quite a tough operating environment. It's not easy, and we want to make sure the workers are in good conditions and they're getting paid adequately, but equally it has to be competitive. And the Port of Auckland one's a classic example, in my view, where it's actually much less about the workers and conditions. It's more about the competitiveness of the ports of Auckland compared to, you know, the Tauranga port and Napier and New Plymouth and others around the country.
Do you think the union's got a hard sell, a tough sell, trying to sell this to the public, sort of get the hearts and minds, given that a lot of us nowadays have to put up with, you know, difficult working conditions possibly and long hours?
I think that everyone has sympathy with the worker, you know, the man in the street. There's no doubt about it. You don't want to see people being done over. But equally, if your business isn't competitive, then it won't exist, and then no one's got a job. So you just have to face the reality. You've got to get more efficient or get out.
Where's this going to end, do you think?
It just seems to be getting more and more side issues now. We've got an uproar about somebody's personal information being leaked onto a website.
Oh, they talk about dirty tricks, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, you know, if it's going to get to that level, they all really want to sit down and have a good look at themselves, because the only people at this stage that are suffering are the public and the manufacturers. And, you know, we're an exporting country. We've got to get the stuff on the wharves and out of here, not sit there while people squabble about tea breaks or throwing lemingtons at people or whatever. I just think it's beyond what we need at the moment.
And as you say, while all this is going in Auckland, there's Tauranga and other ports there ready to pick up the slack, I suppose.
And they will. I mean, so, you know, you need to be careful that, you know, if this drags on for too much longer, you know, permanent relationships will be formed with other ports, and actually the ports of Auckland will become less viable. So, you know, they've got to resolve it.
Let me just ask you about AFCO. Again, about the disruption in production. You said there's, you know, this contractors, non-union workers can get in there and process the meat. Is it being processed by people who know what they're doing, though? You know, are there people in there that have never maybe wielded a knife before? I mean, should farmers be concerned that they're not going to be getting their true weight?
No, not at all. No. This is there are obviously unionised staff and non-unionised staff, and they're working side by side in these works. So my understanding is that the non-unionised staff are doing everything that's required, and they're professionals in the business. So no, AFCO continues to function, and I'm told continues to cope with the stock that's coming through.
And hopefully things will settle down sooner rather than later.
Very much so.
I wanted to ask you both, actually, Jock Hobbs, passing of a good man, a big man this week. Did either of you ever meet him?
Not me.
Yeah, I did meet him once. So look, he was just such a humble guy, and someone who he's just a huge loss to New Zealand. You know, I think people think about the more recent gains of getting the World Cup to New Zealand, but I remember vividly when he really saved professional rugby, saved New Zealand rugby from the clutches of going to, you know, the professional circus. and he's just time and again stepped up when New Zealand rugby or New Zealand needed it. Just a tragic loss, obviously for ourselves, but more importantly for his family. And our condolences clearly go to them.
That's Straight Talk for another week, brought to you by Straight Furrow. Thanks to Mike Peterson and Jeff Smith, and to you at home, as always, for watching. Be sure to check out our website for more great programming. I'm Karen McCarthy. We'll see you next week for more Straight Talk.